Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to explore the architectural blueprint behind the supreme law of the world's largest democracy. We're talking about the Constitution of India. This isn't just some dry legal text. It is the absolute foundation of the Indian democratic system, meticulously designed to secure justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity for a vastly diverse society.
Okay, let's start with a truly staggering number: 395. When it was originally adopted, the Constitution contained 395 articles and 8 schedules. That makes it literally one of the lengthiest written constitutions on the planet. It's an incredibly detailed blueprint, a massive framework governing over 1 billion people today. But how exactly did such an intricate design come to be? Well, to understand how they built this massive document, we're going to look at 4 key areas. First, framing a democratic republic. Second, the philosophy of constitutionalism. Third, the preamble's enduring promise. And finally, the anatomy of the Constitution itself. All right, let's jump right into part 1, framing a democratic republic. Back in 1946, the Assembly faced a massive, and I mean massive, political puzzle. Formed under the Cabinet Mission Plan, the Constituent Assembly originally brought together 389 highly diverse members. You had 292 elected from British Indian provinces, 93 representing the princely states, and 4 from the Chief Commissioner's provinces. After partition, that strength adjusted to 299 members. Just imagine the sheer challenge of bringing all those vastly different voices, representing totally different sections of society, to the exact same drawing board. Tracing this journey back, the initial spark actually came way back in 1934 with M.N. Roy's proposal for a constituent assembly. Fast forward to December 9th, 1946, and they hold their very first meeting. After years of intense, grueling work, the Constitution was officially adopted on November 26, 1949, but they intentionally waited to commence it until January 26, 1950. Why? To commemorate Purna Swaraj Day, or complete independence, which the Indian National Congress had declared back in 1930. It took the drafting committee, chaired by the brilliant Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, nearly 3 agonizingly precise years to pull this off. 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days, to be exact. They had to balance national unity with incredible regional diversity, tackling huge issues like the nature of federalism, minority protections, the language controversy, and figuring out universal adult franchise. But as the project wrapped up, Dr. Ambedkar actually harbored a really profound anxiety. He gave this stark warning: however good a constitution may be, it can turn bad if implemented by bad people. He emphasized that political democracy wouldn't survive without social and economic democracy alongside it. He knew for a fact that inequality and the misuse of power could easily shatter this newly constructed republic. And wow, right? That raises an immediate, almost terrifying dilemma for our constitutional architects. If the rules are only as good as the people enforcing them, how on earth do you protect a democracy from those who might seek to abuse their power? Well, that brings us to Section 2, the philosophy of constitutionalism. There's a really vital distinction we need to make here. Think of constitutional law as the actual physical rulebook. It outlines the distribution of powers, the structure of the legislature, executive, and judiciary, and the procedures for making amendments. But constitutionalism, that's the underlying philosophy ensuring those rules actually limit power and prevent arbitrary rule. It's the spirit of the law demanding limited government, the rule of law, accountability, and the protection of your individual liberties. So, to keep the system from going bad, the framers intentionally wove specific limitations right into the fabric of the state. They embedded constitutionalism through fundamental rights in Part 3, which directly protect you, the citizen, and directive principles in Part 4 to guide the government's ambitions. They set up a federal structure and a parliamentary democracy, and most importantly, they ensured an independent judiciary with the power of judicial review, making the Supreme Court the ultimate guardian of these limits. Moving right along to Section 3, the preamble's enduring promise. We're talking about 5 massive concepts here that represent the absolute foundational ideals of the Indian state. It declares India a sovereign state, totally independent in its affairs; a socialist state, seeking socio-economic justice; a secular state, having no official religion and treating everyone equally; and a democratic republic, where the government is elected by the people and the head of state isn't some hereditary monarch. Together, these words promise justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity to every single citizen. Now, what's fascinating is that the Supreme Court's view of the preamble went through a massive evolution. In an early case called the Barubar Union case, the court actually ruled that the preamble was not legally part of the Constitution. But then, in the landmark case of Ananda Bharati showdown, they completely reversed that stance. They legally validated that the preamble is a part of the Constitution, serving as the ultimate guiding light to help the judiciary interpret all the complex laws within it. If we trace this evolutionary journey, it starts with the original adoption back in 1949. Then we hit that Barubari Union hurdle. Next comes the massive Keshavanda Bharati victory for the preamble's legal status. And finally, the 42nd Amendment Act in 1976, which actually updated the preamble by officially adding the words socialist, secular, and integrity. It just goes to show how these constitutional ideals adapt over the decades to reflect a growing, changing nation. All right, let's dive into our fourth and final section, Anatomy of the Constitution. Think of these parts as the absolute load-bearing pillars of the whole structure. It's an incredibly delicate balance. You have Part 3, the fundamental rights, guaranteeing personal freedoms, equality, and remedies against the state. Then there's Part 4, the directive principles, outlining the socioeconomic goals the state really needs to strive for. And added later is Part IVA, the fundamental duties, which reminds citizens of the obligations they owe back to the nation. It's a beautifully balanced triad of rights, goals, and duties.
The framers basically engineered a unique, hybrid framework here. They took inspiration from all over the globe, but adapted it specifically for India's unique reality. They went with a British-style parliamentary government. They built a federal system, but with a strong unitary bias, meaning the central government holds significant power to keep the country united. They established single citizenship, universal adult franchise so everyone gets a vote, and included emergency provisions to handle critical national crises. Crucially, the Supreme Court acts as a living guardian for this entire structure. In early cases, like A.K. Gopalan, the interpretation of personal liberty was actually quite narrow. But later on, in cases like Maneka Gandhi, the court massively expanded the scope of personal liberty under Article 21. They ensured that any procedures limiting your liberty must be just, fair, and reasonable. It really shows how the structure allows the judiciary to continuously expand the room for individual liberty over time. And that brings us to the ultimate safety mechanism, the basic structure doctrine. Remember that case of Ananda Bharati case we just talked about? Well, it also birthed this profound legal principle. It dictates that while Parliament has the power to amend the Constitution, it absolutely cannot destroy or alter its fundamental framework. So the House can be renovated, sure, but the foundation, things like secularism, democracy, and judicial review, can never be demolished by any ruling government. So, the framers successfully engineered a supreme law that's simultaneously rigid enough to protect basic human rights, yet flexible enough to adapt to a rapidly changing world. It truly is a living document, constantly working to fulfill that core mission of establishing political, social, and economic justice for all. Which brings us to our final thought today. The Constituent Assembly gave us an absolute masterclass in architectural legal design, but echoing Dr. Ambedkar's initial anxiety, a blueprint alone doesn't sustain a building. As we look at the immense rights, duties, and structures laid out before us, we have to ask ourselves, the Constitution provides the blueprint, but are we, the people, capable of being the architects who uphold it day in and day out? Definitely something to think about as you reflect on the incredible framework we've explored today.